In this episode of Trust Talk, we dive into a fascinating conversation with Anne de Graaf, Corporate Affairs Director at Heineken Cambodia. Drawing on her experience in finance, diplomacy, and leadership across global markets, Anna shares her unique insights on the role of trust in international business, the importance of relationships, and the cultural dynamics that shape trust. We also explore her thoughts on body language, negotiation, and how trust is built over time, not as a transaction, but as a deeply personal and complex process. Plus, Anna offers a compelling analogy between trust and music, emphasizing the power of pauses in both. Tune in for an insightful discussion on trust in leadership and cross-cultural environments. Your host today, Severin DeWitt.
Anne, welcome to Trust Talk. You have had an impressive 15-year career, spanning public and private sectors, from working for the AFM, the Dutch financial regulatory body, after the Lehman crisis in 2008, as a diplomat, and to your current role in Heineken in Cambodia. So what initially drew you to finance and diplomacy, and how have these experiences shaped your approach to leadership?
It's a beautiful question. I think it started when I was younger. It started with this immense curiosity that there's so many views to the world, and many of them I don't know. And I also wanted things to be bigger or more exciting, so then you have to step out of your own world, different languages. And the other thing is, I think I studied economics. For me, is how do bigger things connect and how do they impact me and the life that I live or the economy that I'm part of? That is, I think, what drew me. And especially the financial markets after Lehman, the speed of it, the size of it, and how some of the things that we consider as not possible can suddenly change a lot of things. So that excitement and adrenaline, to be very honest, I think definitely drew me to it. I think how it impacts me is your second question to that. I think for me, in my current role, I still think about what is it that I see and how does it impact us? So translating outside in, but also what is it that we stand for? What do we want to achieve? How do I translate it in such a way that it makes sense, or that it matters, or that it can impact something bigger than is us? Because if not, it will not fly. And I still love that strategic thinking. And when things get complex, then
So you started working in Heineken in, I think, in 2019, right?
Correct, yes. Just before COVID, yeah.
How did your experience working with international institutions, because that's what you have been working for before you joined Heineken, how did they influence your role in leading the company's international economic policy work and the strategic engagement?
Well, I think no doubt it helps that I used to work for the public sector as well, that they understand the way of thinking and I can put things into perspective and sometimes also understand how small some of the issues we as a private company bring to the table are maybe sometimes in the heads of people at the other end of the table. So then it helped me to frame them in such a way that it's a win-win. As a company, how do I tie to the agenda or to the bigger economy, or what hats can I wear? Do I wear the hat of an employer or an investor, or as a manufacturer, or as Heineken specifically? I think that definitely helped me. And I think I've just learned my lesson also with the many mistakes I've made, the importance of relationships. That really is also how it grew me during my career, that I was pushed and challenged to do that in different markets or different countries, far from my own bed, as we say in Dutch, far from my home country, from my comfort zone. And that helped because I do the similar thing now for Heineken in a country very different from mine.
Yeah, we'll come to that cultural differences as you work in Cambodia. But as the theme of our podcast is trust, you mentioned in a conversation we had prior to the interview that trust is not a transaction, you said. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Because when you invited me, Severin, I think you really triggered my thinking. I've never really thought about how to define trust. For me, it's such a non-tangible thing. And it's also, the first thing that pops up, and we often hear it, right? If you trust me, I trust you. But that is not how things work in practice. It's not that if you do something, I can assure you that instantly I will do the same thing. Trust doesn't work that way. Sometimes I just make it very visual that you say, okay, I dance with you, and then you dance with me. But it doesn't make that a very fluent dance, or it doesn't make that a very beautiful performance. So it also shows that it's not conditional. You cannot sometimes touch upon what is the exact action or when do I have that trust. So it builds over time and it's not tangible. And it's very personal driven. It depends as well on the person, on the feelings, on the intuition, how you connect with each other. That also means the flip side of it, that it takes a long time to build, but it is so difficult to fix. Because there's also not one action then or one transaction. If you trust me again, I trust you back again. That doesn't work like that either. So that is a little bit what you triggered when you invited me for this interview. And I see that in my work now. It's not that if I apply just the same things that I've done before, that I will win the trust of the people that I now work with. No way.
You also mentioned the role of language, especially body language. I found that very interesting. What is your thinking about the role of language, body language especially?
I love languages. Let me put this up front, because if you learn another language, which I really love doing, is that you understand how expressions are so different in different languages. Similar for body language. What body language is in Cambodia is very different from maybe my body language. And we do not speak with words only. We can say yes, but if my full body says no, the person opposite to me will probably capture, hopefully, the no and not the yes. So I think we sometimes overlook the importance of body language. And I think relating this to trust, if you don't truly listen to what is at that point in time in the air, or what is at that point present, or how people feel or think about that specific discussion or about you, you will never get that trust after that discussion. So I think that is for me the role of body language. So I give you an example of, I can say yes, but if my full body language says no, then you have no answer.
I also know that body language can cause misunderstandings, right? At the other side. So how have you experienced that in your work?
Yes, I think what I really find beautiful about Cambodia, and it's something I haven't valued as much, I think, and I only value more and more, is the importance of showing respect with your body language. And maybe speaking of myself, in the beginning, I wasn't really paying enough attention. I think if you don't do that with your body language, you miss that first opening in the discussion or the first impression that will be so crucial for the rest of the relationship you build. So I haven't done that maybe enough, but I also see the opposite, that now with my team and with my colleagues, if we are more intentional about showing that from the start, how different the conversation goes in the rest. Well, we still say exactly the same thing. We haven't changed what we say.
Another thing you mentioned, how trust is influenced by the familiarity of the environment. Can you share a situation where you had to navigate a completely unfamiliar environment and how that changed your understanding of trust?
Yeah, this is a difficult one because I may not have a very clear answer to you, but let me share how I experienced it. Because I remember being posted in Brussels after being posted in Asia for the first time. And I remember thinking, oh, this is close to home. So I'm more used to it. And then if something is closer to what you know, you tend to think more, at least I tend to think more rationally, extrapolate, build upon your learnings, what you know rationally, and what you impose your own maybe truth on things. And I got surprised because Belgium is by no means, and luckily so, not the same as the Netherlands. Whereas when I was posted in Cambodia, I think it was a given. It was so different from where I came from. I hadn't been there before. So somehow I didn't impose my old learnings or thoughts about how things should be or how I should do, or I didn't impose my own reality. I just absorbed it and embraced it. And with that, to be very honest, I think I got closer to trusting my own intuition and being more open to the truth. And actually maybe getting to know Cambodia slightly quicker than I got to know Brussels, as even if it's closer to home.
By the way, I should have asked you when we started what your role is in Heineken in Cambodia.
I'm the corporate affairs director at Heineken. So I sit in the management team of Heineken Cambodia. We're the biggest international brewer in Cambodia. We employ almost 800 people. We've been here for a very long time. Apart from being a management team member, I also have 3 teams working on sustainability and responsibility, as well as public affairs partnerships with coalitions and stakeholders. And the other thing is communications, internal and external, and leadership change management.
You're also a member of what's called the De Wit Institute for Advanced Negotiations in The Hague. De Wit is called after the two brothers De Wit that were, as we call it in Dutch, raadspensionaris, Cornelis and Johan de Wit. That institute is very much focused on international negotiations. I know that you have been involved in complex negotiations, from EU multilateral discussions to financing. So how do you see the role of trust in these high-stake negotiations?
Oh, crucial, pivotal. Because I think we sometimes underestimate, including myself when I was younger, and still may do it to a certain extent, that we have the tendency to concentrate so much on what we want to achieve and a little bit less on the how. And similar as well, if we think about negotiations, we tend to think about what the other person says or will say, the yes or no. Will he or she accept it, agree with it? But we don't spend enough time sometimes on the person who is actually needed to get from a maybe to a yes. Because in the end, in negotiations, it's the person that you speak to that will make a difference, that will determine what is the next step. So for me, then, I was thinking about this. I think there's two very important lessons for me, and that I always trigger myself, and hopefully I remind myself enough, is there's a very big difference between the willingness to understand the other versus the willingness to agree. I think if you show authentically and if the other person understands that you have a willingness to truly understand, that's a personal exchange. It doesn't say that I hold exactly the same opinion as you, although that I say yes or no to your proposal, but I truly want to understand. I take you as a person as my credible counterpart. The other one, second point would be for me, there's a very big difference between the willingness to create together versus the commitment to impose something on the other. And I think if you have both, the willingness to understand and a commitment to create, there's much more space. And that is a little bit, for me, the philosophy behind win-win, that in the end, you walk out that door with something that you both can go home with. And if you don't have that instant, let's say, commitment from the start, it will be felt. And you will be less successful in negotiations. That's my honest conviction.
You also mentioned, in terms of negotiations, the role of curiosity.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about how curiosity shapes your approach to understanding counterparts, and how does it contribute to building the trust in often high stakes and everyday negotiations?
I think it's similar. For me, the curiosity is both for the person, for the relationship, for not necessarily for the position, if somebody says yes or no, but for the curiosity, what is behind, what makes people want certain things, or what is the perspective of the other person. I don't have to agree. I'm just curious about how you see things. And the curiosity as well, I think this is a little bit I love puzzles and I love complexity, is the curiosity of how can we solve it? What is out there that we can work with, and what is the creativity that we can employ to get to something that works? I remember the most difficult negotiations. I still remember I was very young and I was pregnant back then in Brussels, and I had to come to a deal between member states, between the EU institutions. And I knew up front that there were a few countries and institutions that were opposing each other very much. And I didn't know. I thought, how on earth am I going to do this? And there's two things that made a big difference. And some of them are really minimal. One thing was a lot of coffees.
A lot of coffees.
Yes. Spending time to build relationships with them and showing that I was not in there to say yes or no or close the deal too quickly, but I truly wanted to understand and come to something that will work. And I think the second thing that made a difference is what I love is puzzle, is building a lot of scenarios in my head. Or how could on Earth be certain circles? How could they overlap? What is the common ground that's still possible? And how could all parties go back home saving face? And what is the language that I use that they can also use? So how do I frame it? It's almost magic. There was almost nothing done during the meeting itself, which I was so nervous for. It was all before. All before.
Anne, how do you use intuition and learning ability to build trust in a professional setting. Do you think these qualities become more important when working like yourself in a culturally diverse or even unfamiliar context?
Ooh, I think on your last point, whether they are more or less important, I think they're always important. But you may need to rely on it slightly more, as I just shared with you, if you're so unfamiliar to a certain context. I do truly believe that you have to rely more on your gut and on your intuition and your full openness and willingness to understand and absorb. Because you cannot just impose and play automatic pilot. So it's not more important as a value. I think you will probably need it more and you're triggered to rely on it more in a less familiar and also multicultural context.
I mentioned that we had a conversation prior to this interview just to get to know each other a little bit and build expectations. I was impressed by your beautiful comparison between trust and music, emphasizing the importance of pauses or silences. For me, that was quite new after having had so many different conversations about trust. The role of music and trust has not been covered by me, at least, in Trust Talk. So tell me more about it.
Oh, wow. For me, I sometimes have to ground myself and go back to something that is not rational to help me see things from a different end. So then music helps. So why pauses? I always remember, I cannot really say the exact proverb, but there is this saying that it's also the pauses that make the music. It's not only the tone, but it's also the pauses make are such that you can actually listen to it, you can actually absorb it. Pace is important for all humans. If we only go action, 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 we can't keep up. It's not sustainable. Similar for your brain or for your intuition or emotions, I think pace is very important. So for me, trust. Sometimes things have to settle, or you need to be given the time to reflect and to value what you just sensed or heard. And again, I think it also boils down to, for me, trust is not action. It's not, I do this action and then it works. It's probably what happens after the action, how it sinks in, and what is the next time you see each other, what is the reaction, how does it feel? That will probably be even more important than the action. So that is for me the pauses. There's also music is hard work. It's hard work to play a difficult piece very well. I tried my best.
You play piano, or what do you play?
I used to play,
Okay.
and I find it tough because I wanted to play it really well, but it's quite tough. It's hard work, but you also realize it's work from the heart, because everyone, every human can feel or hear the difference between a well-delivered piece versus a piece that is just perfect in terms of notes and tones and rhythms, but doesn't have a body to it or doesn't have a personal, I don't know,
Or emotion. Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, that is also like with trust. If it's too perfect, too polished, and I work on it every day, I may not strike the tone right sometimes, but if it's too sterile or it's not, there's no emotion, I think trust will also not grow as quickly.
I wanted to come back to a thing that we just coped with, namely culturally differences, right? And what you just said also is important, because we as Dutch, you are Dutch as well, I'm Dutch, we live in a society where pace, as you mentioned, we are always in a hurry, right? Silences and pauses is not something we admire very much. Whereas in a culture where you are, in Asia, in Cambodia, I've been working in Asia quite a bit as well. The first thing that I noticed when I worked in Asia was, like you mentioned, pauses and take the time to get to know somebody, silences, the listening. So these cultural differences must have also in your work played an enormous big role in establishing the position that you have obtained now.
Yeah, it's a cliche and it's so true. At the same time, I sometimes may be a bit blunt being Dutch. I think they also hold in the Netherlands. I think, first of all, we're all humans. In the Netherlands as well, there's preferences about pace, that we're not taking the time to listen or truly care for someone. So I don't think that is only related to being in a multicultural context. But yes, of course, there are tendencies and trends, and there is a little bit more nuance between them. What I love, what I really truly love, and I think that's also very human, is the importance of relationships. And again, I think relationships are not built with, I say this, you say this, and then we can leave the room. No, that is not how relationships are built. So that is very true in my current role.
My final question is about something that I think you mentioned earlier in our conversation, is authenticity. Many guests I have interviewed for the podcast have highlighted authenticity as a key factor in building trust. For you personally, what role does that play in both your life and your work? And given your leadership role in a big organization like Heineken in Cambodia, how do you stay true to yourself while navigating the challenges of such a diverse and dynamic setting?
That's such a difficult thing. It's such a theme, right? And I think personally as well, I sometimes struggle with it because authenticity comes also with vulnerability. And it comes with showing when you agree, when you don't agree, but also when you are at ease or when you're not at ease. And also, I think, especially as a leader as well, showing when you don't know. And I think that is not something that we sometimes are taught to do, or what maybe in the past, maybe strong leaders would always do. But I truly believe that that gives that human touch to it that will help teams to run faster because they build a relationship for you. Is it always easy? I think I have a tendency to want to work hard and to solve it and to get it done. To pause, what we just referred to music, to pause is my struggle at times. So I think your question was spot on. How do I ground myself instead of every time seeing things that are not right yet or that I need to understand better? Sports is not with the head, but with the body. So sports for me is very important as a way to release some of those ever continuing thoughts, distraction, to really surprise. And in a way, adventure, to go from one adventure to another also helps to sometimes break those patterns and go back to the essence.
So if we talk about adventure with a closing remark, what is your next adventure after Heineken?
Oh, I think part of the adventure is not knowing. Really, truly, I think part of the adventure is not knowing.
Otherwise it wouldn't be an adventure, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Yeah.
It's not planning it, right? I think we can plan until a certain extent. I also believe that if you do the things that you love really well, and I don't think I do everything really well, but I really embrace it and I want to learn it, things will come.
Anne, thank you very much for being our guest at Trust Talk. I wish you all wisdom and success in Cambodia for Heineken. And thank you for taking the time to talk about trust.
With pleasure. Thank you so much to you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Trust Talk. We hope that you found the conversation valuable and informative. At Trust Talk, we believe in the power of trust to create positive change in the world. If you believe in our mission, we would greatly appreciate your support. You can help keep Trust Talk going by making a donation on our website at trusttalk.co/donate. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps us to continue bringing you thoughtful and engaging podcasts. Thank you for your support and for listening to Trust Talk. We look forward to meeting you again for future episodes.